I want to switch gears and really focus in on what I think are alarming and disturbing comments made by President Trump last night when he yet again refused to condemn white supremacists and calling on one group to, quote, stand back and stand by. In August 2019, Director Comey, you published an op-ed in the New York Times about how President Trump was deliberately fanning the flames of racism in America. Here's what you wrote, and if I can quote it to you, every American president, knowing what lies deep within our country, bears a unique responsibility to say loudly and consistently that white supremacy is illegitimate, that encouraging a politics of racial resentment can spawn violence, and that violence aimed at people by virtue of their skin color is terrorism. Director Comey, what does it mean for the President of the United States to call on the Proud Boys, which the Southern Poverty Law Center has designated as a hate group that regularly expresses white nationalist views, to stand back and stand by?
It lifts the control rods. In the basement of our amazing country has always been a small amount of radioactive stew, and we've controlled that racist stew with law and with culture. And when the President of the United States starts talking in that way about that kind of group, he's pulling out of that radioactive stew the control rods that we've used for 50 years to suppress racist violence. It is a deeply disturbing development, and I hope no matter what your politics are, you see it the same way.
And just to put a sharp edge on this, sir, since 9/11, is it true that the majority of our domestic terrorist actions, killing American lives, everywhere from a church in South Carolina to a synagogue in Pittsburgh, the majority of our murders, terroristic murders in this country, have been done by right-wing organizations?
That's my understanding of the data.
Domestic terrorism, domestic right-wing organizations feeding hatred and bigotry. And so how do these shameful comments of the President of the United States, his outright refusal to condemn white supremacy, dangerous white supremacy, affect the psychology of groups like the Proud Boys and other violent extremist groups like them, other white nationalist groups that we have seen conduct and carry out such violence? How does it affect the psychology of these groups?
It gives them license, and it makes them cool in the eyes of the people who make up that radioactive stew. And so it will attract more people to their warped view of the world and to their groups. It is a free pass to people that nobody wants in their communities. And I don't know whether today the president has tried to correct what he said, but I would sure hope he would.
And Director Comey, you're not alone. You are not the first FBI director, nor the last FBI director to state plainly the dangers of white supremacy, of this kind of violence. Your successor, FBI Director Christopher Wray, recently testified that, quote, racially motivated violent extremism primarily carried out by white supremacists account for the majority of domestic terroristic threats. This is an imminent threat, as a president seems to be calling to such groups to stand by, a president who has explicitly said if he loses this election, it will be an illegitimate election, a president who has explicitly failed to commit himself to the peaceful transfer of power. And so how do President Trump's statements about these groups affect the FBI's ability to address this threat?
The FBI is fighting a fire of racist violence, and with words like that, the president is using a fire hose to spray gasoline on that fire. And maybe he misspoke. Maybe when he said stand down and stand by, he meant something else. I sure hope for the sake of our whole country, he'll say that today, what he really meant, and condemn these groups.
But, sir, do you see the connection to the election that is ongoing right now, and where we are less than 35 days away from that election? Do you have cause for not just concern, but real alarm about these groups being incited and motivated by the words of the President of the United States towards violent actions?
Yes, that's what I meant by using my homely metaphor of spraying gasoline with a fire hose. It creates a dangerous blaze for all of us, not just people of color, but for every community in America that has these thugs and criminals have a presence there ought to worry about this. And the President of the United States should be charged with tamping it down, not letting it free.
So here we are in the United States of America, where the current FBI director, where the past FBI director are both saying unequivocally that we are facing a threat of domestic terrorism, and clearly saying that the words of the President of the United States is not calming, is not unifying, is not bringing us together, is not condemning this, is actually inciting it, to use your words, that is spraying gasoline on the fires of hatred going into an election, where he is literally specifically talking to people and inviting them to potentially do things like show up at polling sites, to take action, to stand by. I don't understand how we don't see this as what it is, that we are on the verge of seeing a real threat to our fundamental democratic ideals and the smooth election processes to which have been, frankly, a hallmark of our country in our recent history. This is a dangerous moment in time. It is a frightening moment in time. And we know from what happened in San Antonio, Texas, and a number of other occasions, that people who are carrying out these actions are invoking the words of the President of the United States in their hateful, violent actions. This is a frightening time for America. And for us not to be assembling the united, bipartisan will of this Judiciary Committee, or the bipartisan will of the United States Senate to act against this, when we have seen the agony of what happened in South Carolina in an African-American church, the agony of what happened in San Antonio Walmart, the agony of what happened in a synagogue in Pittsburgh, and so many other occasions when hate crimes are on a rise, it is shameful that we are doing nothing. The only thing necessary for evil to be triumphant is for good people to do nothing. Your metaphor. The President of the United States last night sprayed gasoline on the fires of hate. Our inaction right now, on the eve of this contentious election, means that we are standing by and letting this arsonist that is our president continue to menace the democracy we all cherish. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.